As a Part 107 pilot, how do we differentiate our sub-250 flights as recreational to avoid getting dinged or license revoked? Or can we just not fly at all without remote ID? Johnny Kane, question is going to be difficult for me to answer quickly, so I'm going to slow down and make sure I get the details right. What defines a flight as commercial or recreational is the intent of the pilot at the time of the flight. Now, this is tricky because intent, who can know what is really in your heart, right? Obviously, if you are accepting money for the flight, obviously, if the person for whom the flight is being performed is a business, then there is no debate that that is a 107 flight, that's a commercial flight, and you're flying under 107 rules. But if you just take a drone out to the park and you fly it, and and you have no intent, you sincerely have no intent to monetize that flight in any way, or to have any commercial interest in that flight, then that's a recreational flight. And if the FAA came asking, you would say that was a recreational flight. And then they would sort of have to prove or argue in front of a judge that you're lying. Now, there's people who think they can game this system. There's people who say, well, I'm going to go do a recreational flight around my brother's car dealership, and I'm going to edit that all together into a show reel, and I'm going to upload it to YouTube. And then my brother can download it and use it for his car dealership, but it was a recreational flight, so I don't need a 107. And I'm like, okay, if you feel like that argument would fly in front of an FAA, in front of a federal judge, if it came to that, if the FAA came to you and said, this is a commercial flight, where's your 107? And you said, well, it was a recreational flight. It's just a coincidence that my brother who owns a car dealership used it on his website, right? If you feel like that argument would fly in front of a federal judge, be my guest. I don't think so. So you can't really, you can't really game this system. But just because you have a 107 doesn't mean that you can't also fly recreationally. You just have to legitimately be flying recreationally and not like trying to pull some shady bullshit. Make sense? Little Bladed. We're going to get Little Blade's question. He says, should I re-ask the question or should I just accept it's not interesting enough? I'm not going to take that from a patron. We're answering your question. Little Bladed says, I'm coming from the Synolog 35V2. I got myself an iFlight AOS Evo. Anything I need to pay attention to that's madly different? So the throttle is going to be the main thing that's different between a Synolog 3.5 and an iFlight AOS 5-inch. The 5-inch is going to be more powerful and more responsive. It's going to have better handling, but you'll kind of get used to that as you get more aggressive. Excuse me. As you get more aggressive with the flight. The main thing is it's just going to be more powerful. You're going to hover and cruise lower in the throttle, and you're going to need a little bit more, gracious sakes, I have the hiccups. You're going to need a little more precise control of the throttle to get it to do what you need to do. Those are going to be the main differences. How long range can a 5-inch actually go? The main limitation on a 5-inch long-range performance is going to be the battery life. Typical battery life for a 5-inch is 3 to 5 minutes if you're pushing it, and maybe 7 minutes if you're going real slow cruising, and you're just not going to get very far in 5 to 7 minutes. With larger batteries, you could push it a little further, but 5 inches are really not optimized for duration of flight. The control and the video link will typically go farther than the battery will let you fly. Thank you, Kevin Schnellya FPV, who asks, thank you for a $5 super chat. Can I take the VTX out of an old Mavic and retrofit it to a freestyle frame? I mean, I'm sure that you can. I don't know how elegant it would be. I certainly don't think it would be very durable, but I'm sure you can. I don't know if you would need to like take all of the electronics out of the Mavic, not just the VTX. But it's going to be a higher latency connection. It's not going to work well for an FPV drone. It's going to have too much latency.
Also, just to be clear, I hope you mean the goggle, the old DJI goggle, not the goggle V1, like the FPV
that doesn't
goggle,
bind to the Mavic. You need the goggle like the goggles RE or the original DJI goggle, not the goggle V1, the FPV goggle. Yeah. No, that's not a good idea. This is the short version. It's not a great idea. It could be done, but it's a novelty idea, not a aha. Want this one trick. Ron Grand says in Taylor, Texas, Samsung is building one of the largest chip plants in the world. Look it up. Yes, okay. Thank you for a $5 super chat, Ron Grand. Yeah, no, we know they're building them. They're definitely building them. Scott Bisson, thank you for a $5 super chat. Glad you're back. Is it normal for the Crux 3.5 to use 60 or 70% processing power? Yeah, it's pretty normal, Scott, assuming that's an F4 processor to run at 60 or 70% CPU utilization. One thing to keep in mind is that the way that Betaflight calculates CPU utilization changed in Betaflight 4.4, and as a result, Betaflight 4.4 usually reads higher CPU utilization than earlier versions of Betaflight. Even though the CPU is not doing anything significantly different. 60 or 70% is fine. Finley FPV, thanks for a 10 pound super chat. My 6S quad weighs about 890 grams. Oh. Ugh. Ugh. That's too heavy, Finley. I mean, if it's a 5-inch. So it doesn't have the power I want. Would you recommend making an 8S quad? I mean, yeah. Okay, if you insist on having a 5-inch quad that weighs almost 900 grams, then yes, that is a place where 8S would start to be valuable. 100%. To Scott M, for the $100 super chat, very generous. I will be taking my wife out to dinner tonight. We're going to Applebee's with this. I'm joking, but actually, the way everything's gotten so expensive, $100 might actually be a night out at Applebee's, and that just makes me sad. Thanks for your content, says Scott. I want to have friends to be able to put on another set of goggles and see my perspective. What suggestions? Specs are Dominator HD Avatar. Okay, so Dominator HD, the good news is that you have a lot of options for friends. Number one thing you could do is get a USB to HDMI cable and an external screen. Even a television would work, but you could also get a little 7-inch. What I suggest you do is you search for DSLR field monitor. Buy a field monitor screen. It'll be a 7-inch screen. It's about $100, $200 maybe, and it's made to go on top of a camera. And they'll have an HDMI input, and you can plug it right into your goggles. Be aware, though, that if you're running at 100 frames per second, most of the screens will not do 100 frames per second. So you specifically said friends putting on a set of goggles. What you need to do is buy a second set of Avatar goggles and then use the broadcast or audience mode in your goggles. If you turn on broadcasting in your goggles, your friends can tune in. So that's the answer.